Hi there everybody. I thought I would start a series of videos for this channel that in some ways could be, maybe I'll call it portfolio review of my own work, but it's also a little bit of a history. So I thought, why not start a little bit of history at the beginning? And this image here that you're looking at is not quite the first, but it is certainly based on the first digital image that I ever created. The reason it's called Ankaras is because this background photograph here, excluding these towers obviously, these very cheesy looking 3D towers, and we'll get to that in a minute. This photo was shot in Ankara, Turkey. And I was there in when was that? That was 1989. And so I named this particular image Ankaras because it's based on Ankara. So I have very fond memories of Turkey and this region and this area, and this is, it stuck. The name stuck, and I've kept it with it ever since. Anyway, so the 3D that you'll see in these images, this was one of the images I created for my final year portfolio at RMIT, which is Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. And it was the final year to do and create any kind of portfolio you liked. And so my choice was to use Photoshop and composite, shoot, model, and also use model kits, plastic model kits, to create a science fiction story. It turned out to be a very loose story. I'm not sure there was really a story there, sort of, but very loose. But it was more about creating the images that I wanted to create. So before we get to going through these images, I'll show you pretty much where it started. And I've got some quick images here, and just to give you some context as to, well, this was created in, my portfolio was 1993. I first started using Photoshop a year or so before that. And I don't have an image, but the first Mac computer I used with Photoshop was a Macintosh 2FX. And from memory, the version I used or learnt on or started using was version 1.6, I think. Anyway, fast forward, I ended up buying my own computer, which was one of these guys. This is the PowerPC, the 8180 AV. And I had 48 meg of RAM, a 500 megabyte hard drive, and I had a 44 megabyte SideQuest drive attached to it. And I had a 16-inch monitor, and that was my beast. So CD-ROM drive up here, floppy drive right there. And this is version 3, which I think might have been, what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there was 7 discs, 6 or 7 discs. But for version 2 and 2.5, which is what I did in my portfolio, and I think there were only 5 discs from memory, something like that. Bear in mind, each one of these discs only holds 1.3 meg. And that cost me the entire system with a 16-inch monitor, a copy of Photoshop, and a copy of Strata Studio Pro, which was the 3D application I used. That totaled 15,000 Australian dollars at the time. And how I got to using Strata, when I bought that first computer system, by the way, that's the operating system. The first operating system I used, or that was on my system, was actually System 7, not System 9. So this was later. That's the state of the art back in the early to mid 90s. And it was pretty cool, very cool. This is the interface. When I bought this system, I got some trial software. They gave you all this software for free that you could try out. And this is a 3D program called Infinity. As you can see, the interface is fairly rudimentary and primitive in a way, but it was pretty cool at the time. Here's a little light thing. You could grab this and you can swing it around and move the light direction any way you like. So it was a very, very cool thing. So the demonstration version of the software that I had in my new system allowed me to create scenes and render out really small images, but I couldn't save the file. So whatever I did that night I had to render out the image, and it would only render out at a certain resolution. I think it was like 720 pixels, and that's it. I couldn't save the actual file, the 3D data. So when I closed it down, I lost it, and I had to start all over again. So, but as a demonstration, this was enough to convince me to go the 3D route and composite 3D into photography than the method I was thinking of using to create my portfolio. I was going to build these things as actual miniatures and photograph all this stuff. And then when I mean photograph, not with a digital camera, with film camera, and then have to scan the film and then cut all these things out and composite them. But it was much, much easier to actually build these things in 3D. Now, once I figured I could use 3D, I went out and I bought, as part of my package, I bought Strata Studio Pro. I think it was either version 1 and or 1.5. It was somewhere in this range. Okay, so this was the second image I created. You can see here's the model kit. I think this was orange and yellow, and I think I had 2 different versions of it, 2 different colors. Now, as you can see, I'll go to the next image. This portfolio was heavily influenced by a variety of things. Every possible science fiction influence that I known at the time made its way into this portfolio. So if any of you are familiar with Babylon 5, this color scheme was very much Babylon 5. So that was playing at the time. This was around, you know, I suppose the mid to tail end of Star Trek The Next Generation was also playing around that time frame. But definitely Babylon 5, jump gates and all that sort of stuff. It was very cool. I'm not sure of the actual sequence of these images. There was this vague story. So we're following these ships. We go past one of these towers. Now, mind you, I should also point out that any of the painting, like this painting down here, all this stuff, this was painted with a mouse. I didn't have a Wacom tablet. And Photoshop, back in those days, in version 2, there was 1 layer and 1 undo, and no mouse. Sorry, no Wacom pen. So what do we got? Yeah, compositing and cutting out splashes and so on and so forth, and, you know, sun rays. And so for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason they're really low down to the water here, and then woof, they fly up and they come down into one of these entry ports here. Now for the eagle-eyed, I wasn't matching the 3D camera to the photography. I had no way I didn't know how to do that back in those days. So I had to kind of roughly guesstimate. The scale of whatever this window is a little bit crazy too. Okay, so we follow these guys. You can see here's my 2 different Nostromo shuttle paint jobs, 2 different colors. That's just a double of that one. And what I did was I took these outside and I photographed them in sunlight so that they had realistic lighting. Okay, so they've come through this portal inside this big hollow tower. You can see the text just smearing here. It's okay here, somewhere there it's okay, but it was just like a projection and it was just smearing right through that shape. So there was a lot I had no idea about back then. You can tell from the lighting, it's just, the lighting is all over the place. And these are all photographs of people I took, photographs of people that I'd seen. Like I photographed this man in Turkey, these guys in Turkey. I think it was one of my old lecturers and fellow students and so on, friends and whatnot. And they've just been duplicated along. This one is like we're talking about, this was inspired by Babylon 5. This one was inspired by the Jim Burns painting. It's in a book called Mechanismo. Anyone who's familiar with Jim Burns' work will recognize this archway and the composition. Okay, so now we're into Blade Runner influence territory, obviously. A little different in tone and color. And this, in my particular idea, this guy's office was not high up. It was below the waterline. What I didn't have time to do, what I didn't know how to do, and I didn't have access to, was filling this window with the depths of the ocean and have fish and your whales or something, you know, swim past. I should maybe revisit some of these ideas and how would I do this as a modern day? What would I do with this today? That might be an interesting little exercise. More Photoshop work. He was wearing sunglasses and I just painted around it. So here's another alien of some sort. Bad texture map smearing across here. the colouring is just weird. Just the quality of the digital files. Look at the blacks in here are just all smoked out and weird, and this is really jet black up here. There's so much wrong with it. It's crazy, but it was a lot of fun. I would be awake until almost every single morning for a year doing this portfolio. I would wake up, or not wake up, I would be going until I heard the birds singing outside my window on the trees. And that's when I knew it was about 4:30, thereabouts. And I was doing that almost every single night. This is obviously platform 327. So now we're Star Wars influenced. This is the Cloud City platform. Strata could do some pretty cool stuff. You know, look at this sort of refraction going on in here in this glass thing. Very easy to get metallic surfaces and so on. The rain is just all 2D. Again, another, see, Star Trek now. The guy's a Trill. He wasn't in the rain. All this sort of wetness on his jacket was put in with Photoshop. Same here. Nobody looks really wet. It doesn't look like it's wet. It's just this rain texture over the top. And you don't see rain. You do not see rain like this. You wouldn't see it up here. You only see it in the darker areas. Back to the Blade Runner influence. So now we've got our, Tyrell, not Tyrell, the police building, when Deckard flies down into the rooftop. Yeah, this is my version. So I managed to get, there's a lot not working out right in these images, but again, it's 1993, 94. So, but I managed to get on top of a building via a friend and took some photographs of the city. So I knew roughly what I wanted, but I needed access to a tall building to shoot this scene. And somehow we end up in this place. So this is a old palace. The name of it escapes me, but it was also, I photographed this in Turkey. And this is part of a quarry, an old disused quarry near where I used to live. And we have this sky that's just flying past. It's whatever's going on here, whatever the wind is that's creating that, ought to be blowing this guy over. He's almost a Columbo looking character, isn't he? He's an old friend of mine, but he's got a bit of a Columbo look about him. Let's see, what else? So now this one isn't necessarily influenced by a film. This is influenced by the Terran Trade Authority series of science fiction books, picture books that were put out in the early 80s? Mid 80s, I think they were, the Terran Trade Authority series of books. The first one was Spacecraft 2000 to 2100 AD, and they did one called Space Rex. And that, well, I love Space Rex. And my love of Space Rex came from those series of books. So this is most definitely my homage to Space Wreck. I'm not quite sure how this thing is holding itself up, but anyway. And he's a very good friend of mine, Angus, and we went down to this beach, this coastal area, and we got him all dressed up and used him as a character, and that was a fun afternoon, actually. So if you're watching this, Angus, thanks, buddy. I remember that. It was a lot of fun. There were some other images. I can't find them for some reason, but this is enough to get the kind of the ball rolling for this series of videos. My first attempt at actually building spacecraft in 3D. So these were fully 3D created. So was this. And these are easy to do. These are just an outline shape and a revolve, or a lathe, whatever you might want to call it, and dead easy. This is where I started incorporating things like, even though I had motion in the sky in this silly one, I wanted to use it for this sort of thing here. I was quite chuffed about that. Terrible texture mapping going on there. Same with here. This is way too dark. Look at that. The blacks in that level there. The black levels down here are just crazy. Look at this value under here. The value here and under here, they're quite light. Same with this is quite light. But look at this. They're black. Shouldn't be like that at all. Terrible. How did I ever get a job? And the last shot was back to this character and looking back at the city of actually this is Istanbul. This is not Ankara anymore. This is Istanbul, but I put the towers back in to make it look like it was the same one, and you've got to have smoke coming out of something someplace. That is my 1994 RMIT portfolio. So it wasn't strictly a photography portfolio, and I had it printed out. I had each one printed, and I had a book made, and I glued them into the pages of a book. And that was my presented portfolio. I then had all of these images. I think I had 18 images recorded to 35mm film, slide film, and I had them mounted into black card. And I had 2 sheets of those, and those 2 sheets I took with me to the Siggraph conference in 1995, and that's what I presented as a portfolio to get work. And I traipsed around the LA Convention Center trying to hook up with all the different VFX companies looking for matte painting work. And it was this portfolio that I showed to Digital Domain, and I got a job with their new media department. So that's a little history. Maybe I can go into a little bit. I can do another video on how I actually went about that process of getting work at Digital Domain. Some of it may apply today for younger people, but we'll see. But anyway, so this is the RMIT portfolio, my first real science fiction work that I created, and this one here is my main image. It's old, it's daggy, but it's the one I'm the most proud of, and it has the essence of, I suppose, everything that I love about this type of work. Anyway, thanks for watching.